podcast about everything that is new now and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Elwood, and my collaborator, David Yakobovich.
And our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Where the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized podcast for enterprise executives adopting AI. I'm Christina Elwood, your host for today's episode. We're talking today with Paul Baier, CEO of GAI Insights, the leading Gen AI analyst firm. Paul, welcome to AI Realized.
Thank you, Christina. Excited to be here.
Well, we're really glad to have you too. AI depends, of course, upon vast amounts of data, and it learns our behaviors as it goes along in learning with us. So in your recent HBR article, you and John made a call for countries, companies, and individuals to, in your words, own your own intelligence. Can you elaborate on what you mean by this?
Absolutely. We are inflection as a society in many different areas, one of which is trying to understand the societal impact of AI technologies. But in parallel to that, also understanding the unprecedented market power of the big tech firms. The big tech firms, the top five or six, are larger than the third and fourth economy combined. They're kicking off about $480 billion of free cash flow a year. Microsoft kicks off $2 billion a week. There is no trust busting coming in sight, and they are on a roll. And they're on a roll with technologies that scale exponentially. Why does that matter? We have seen in the last 10 to 15 years the location data and metadata of all the citizens and the companies in the world used for competitive advantage by the high-tech firms. We are now entering a world where there's even more data that's out there in terms of understanding processes. And the simple example I'd like to share is what happened with Toys R Us in the early days of the internet. In the early days of the internet, Toys R Us executives said, no one's going to buy toys on the internet. That's a stupid little novelty item. So they said, Amazon, why don't you do the toys for us for the first couple of Christmases, which they did, and they signed a contract. After 3 years, Toys R Us figured out this is something important. We should probably do this ourselves. And Amazon said, fine, you do it yourselves. We're going to take what we learned the last 3 years and now be in the toy business. And those 3 years, Amazon learned things like how to position the toys, how to position it by age, the graphics, the communications, the coupons here. None of that was contractually breaking contracts here, but that process knowledge now had been transferred from decades from Toys R Us now to Amazon. And the same question is being asked by big companies, not just us. They're being asked by companies, and we're reflecting what we're seeing out there. It is, what does that mean for real important parts of my businesses that are cognitively advanced and now using AI? What does it mean for people who are doing drug discovery and oil and gas refinery and stock trading? And when I'm using public models, it's hard for me not to have at some point a conversation with, let's say, the product manager talking about what the roadmap should be for drug discovery, because we want that vendor, as in traditional stuff, to use it. And your own intelligence is a framework, a global conversation that we want to start where the 194 sovereign countries, the 235 million companies, and the 8 billion plus citizens are starting to grasp with this, because it's going to take more than just hoping for regulation out of Seoul and the EU and open source models to have a fair and equity distribution of this power structure.
So it sounds like as much as we have the opportunity to innovate and redesign our businesses and create a competitive edge, this technology also represents a threat, a competitive threat, existential threat. So what are some of the practical steps that organizations need to take to implement your guidance on own your own intelligence?
Well, I think part of it is starting to assess what really is our intelligence and what really is our core competitive advantage here that's digitally based. Many companies have already been doing this for years. Insurance companies, for instance, already have very advanced AI groups that do use traditional AI, and Gen AI has been a natural extension of that. And that's been more natural for them to think about this. Other companies, which we call in the crucible, which they're particularly at risk of revenue decline because of Gen AI over the next 3 years, aren't. And a good example of that's law firms. There's unbelievable transformation coming in law firms. Most law firms have never thought of themselves as a technology partner here. Do they need to own AI? Do they develop the models here? So the practical steps we recommend are as follows. One, start having this discussion to get alignment on the delineation. Two, start understanding options of maybe some of the data and some of the models are behind your firewall or behind your trust environment in the private cloud. Others are maybe in the public cloud for cost-effective reasons for a chatbot on your website, for instance. Third, start asking a lot more tougher questions. Open source LLM is totally different than open source Apache and Linux. Those open source things, you actually got the full source code and all the elements of it. That's not true today with the quote open source model. They're almost like free source models. You might get the weights in Llama 3's cases, but you don't get the training data. You don't get access to some of the ways to actually run the model here. So it really is a difficult and important conversation. And then the third area the companies to start thinking about is what really does my workforce look like 5 years from now, and how do we manage it? So if I have a 5,000 person organization today, I have 5,000 person organization. I have workforce management, talent management for humans. We are moving towards a world where every one of our employees is going to have a digital twin, and we're going to have 30, 40, 50, 80 different LLMs running out. I'm going to actually be managing my intelligence for my most important value creation processes across a collection of humans and AI based, or robots and humans. And how do I think about that? And what are the boundaries and what are the decision rights is a really important topic that's going to take a while for companies to even understand the issues, much less before they start implementing practical solutions.
Sounds like it could become a barrier to adoption if we don't have answers to those questions. How do we manage the data and the security and these intelligence assets? Do you feel like companies need to slow down and answer the questions before they begin? Or do you feel like there is a way that they can get started and figure out their intelligence assets and how to protect them longer term over a longer timeline?
It's a great question. I think the thing that we see most is that this is like swimming. You have to get in the water and learn. And you've got to start at the baby pool and go up here. So we encourage companies to do whatever you can to accelerate your learning processes. That does not necessarily mean accelerate your spend. There's lots of things that companies can do for no code large language model products, for instance. There's a whole slew of great products out there from ChatHub or Custom GPT AI and others where you can have your own chatbot on your website with public data for less than $500 in 2 hours, and start taking and putting in LLM based a chatbot in every single one of your knowledge bases on your public site for your product descriptions, for your onboarding employee here. That's a great way to start learning. And when you start learning with your AI rebels and your AI enthusiasts, they will then take you to the new opportunities in the organization here. And then that will help executives understand it here.
So that sounds like start with your public data and get your feet wet and begin to learn and gain the skills and the understand the opportunities and move into using your proprietary data and find your intelligence assets as you're doing both of those steps. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. And the whole time learning and learning as a cross-functional team and not just within an IT silo.
Okay. And in fact, I was going to ask you if you were recommending to people that they form an AI center of excellence or some equivalent kind of a designated group within the enterprise to take responsibility to concentrate the initiatives and the learnings for the organization.
We think that a lot of a good analogy to learn through this is look at the quality movement here. And the quality movement was a set of processes and thinking that needed to be able to drive value, you needed to have levels of expertise, white belts and black belts, and needed to be at the process level. It didn't mean you weren't rigorous, but it means you needed to get that organizational thinking down here. So that's the goal. I think we don't have a strong recommendation on exactly what the right organizational mechanism is, other than the fact that if you create a center, you have to make sure you don't send a message organization you don't need to worry about it here. If you remember back in the early days of the quality movement, many companies had a VP of quality, and therefore the rest of the organization said, I don't have to worry about quality because we have a VP of quality. It's his job and not my job. And it's the same thing on the AI Center of Excellence. If the AI Center of Excellence is seen as a learning hub to support lots of organizational learning, that's a great model. If it seemed like, oh, it's an outsourced thing, all decisions and all learning is in that one group, then that's not an effective model in our view.
Do you think it matters whether the organization is a complex, loosely coupled set of multiple players that, like you have in a healthcare system or a country, versus a company where everything is under the command and control of a single management team and board?
I think, like in a lot of things, it comes down to leadership. Do you have a leadership in either loosely controlled or, top down that's encouraging experimentation, learning, rapid adoption of new technologies or not? And I think those cultural issues or policy issues are above and will be pervasive in whatever the org structure is. So org structure doesn't solve the imperative of leadership in our view.
If you were talking with a board of directors, what would you be advising them on their role in leading in this area?
Well, first of all, I would congratulate them at least having a meeting at the board level in Gen AI, because I would be there, I'm assuming, and we've done a lot of board meetings here. The second thing I go down, and it's not meant to be controversial, it's meant to be dramatic, is that I assert that it would be irresponsible for this board, and see if they would agree, to hire a VP in their organization who's never used a browser, ever. Everyone says that's agree here. And I assert in this age of AI, it's equally responsible to have a board member or senior executive member who opines on Gen AI strategy or capital X or capital allocations who hasn't personally used this technology for 3 hours. It is easy to use. If you're one of the 8.1 billion people that use Google and you know how to type something in a box, then you can type something in a box. You're a prompt engineer. Or you can put in the context window and try it on a ChatGPT and start experiencing the transformation element, because this is different. You can't research your way to what China or Japan's like. You need to go visit it, and then you understand better, and it's the same thing for that. So that's the first set of things. And the third thing we recommend to boards is to reuse our WINS framework. WINS stands for words, images, numbers, and sounds. It's a subset of knowledge work. And it's a handy little framework to help industries, companies, and jobs understand the urgency. Not everything's urgent for all companies, but it is for some. And it's less important what any individual board members view on it. It's much more important what the alignment is at that board level. Is it urgent for us in this particular company at this particular moment? And without explicit conversations on that, in our experience, you aren't getting any kind of alignment, much less optimized investment.
Do you think the board needs to lead the conversation about, for the own your own intelligence risk factors? Like, do we understand our intelligence? Have we, addressed and mitigated the risk? Do we need to have a designated committee related to it? Is there anything like that you think the board needs to consider, especially for companies that have so much process intelligence that would potentially be leaked,
Yeah.
much like you talked about the Toys R Us case, but where you would have behavioral and process leaks through the use of these tools?
I think a lot of things that the board's there to advise and hire and fire the CEO and a few other administrative things here. So I think the key question for the board is ask good questions. And when board members ask us what questions to ask around this, we really encourage them to ask, obviously, open-ended questions, but questions around how are we thinking about our cognitive assets? Do we even know what they are? How much of those can be automated? How much of those can leak out? And in most cases, we have found that conversation hasn't even started. So part of it is educating the board on the realities of the market power out there. The second is to help the board understand how fast things are changing. And third is to start figuring out what are questions to ask and get answers from, or at least start the dialogue about, is there really ways to have process leakage here? Is the 0.002% or maybe 4% chance in the next 10 years that Microsoft gets true AGI? Does that represent a risk? They have all our data. Does that matter? And at least start asking questions to start having meaningful conversation on that, because right now that conversation is not happening at most boardrooms.
Yeah, I think those are some of the same questions that need to be asked at the management team level.
Yes.
So, yeah, it makes good sense. Just shifting gears a little bit into the analyst view that you hold, clearly AI can be used to optimize existing processes, but it can also be used to do things that were previously impossible. Which do you predict will make the biggest impact on the world?
Oh, I think the previously impossible we're just stretching the surface. I mean, the recent New York Times article about the gentleman who had ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease and now is able to talk to his family again. I mean, that's breathtaking. And that was beyond the boundary condition of what people thought possible 12 months ago. And we're going to continue to have, in our view, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of examples like that. So on the AI optimistic side, we could be looking at a transformational world just 10 years from now.
That's a very exciting prospect, but a little unsettling when we have so many questions that are unanswered, aren't they? What do you advise for people who want to learn more and tap into resources that can help them with their own framing and decision making related to adopting this technology?
It's really important. I think the first and foremost is to embrace the pace, understand the change is not going to slow down. So we've got to get used to this winds. We're going to live in a hurricane of change. And then secondly is figure out for your personal learning style what works. How do you create your own learning group? Do you learn by reading? Do you learn by doing? Do you learn by teaching? Learn by reading and then doing. And then how do you find a learning group, a learning partner that works? We have a weekly learning lab that's 3,000 of our members are part of. That's been very effective for them. We do a lot of learning groups within companies. We encourage them to do it. We know people do partnering. But finding someone else to, quote, learn to swim, finding someone else to learn to be constantly using the robots throughout the day. Hey, have you asked your robot? That's a good question. Have we asked our co-intelligence? Is the critical path, in our view, of moving this technology through the human change management process from parlor trick and novelty to indispensable tool, which is quickly moving towards. And people get there fast enough, we'll see the biggest advantage, both personally for the career and for the companies.
I'm personally very impressed with the commitment and the follow through that your organization has brought to the marketplace for people who want to learn about AI. Not only do you do the learning labs and your emails, you are incredibly prolific and you're writing. There's 4 different HBR articles that were published recently, and you're very generous in sharing your thoughts and your knowledge and expertise. And I just want to, give you a shout out that I really respect what you guys are doing. But as we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Christina, thank you for the kind words of the whole team here. So I can't take a lot of credit for that, but it really is appreciated. And we are very open and hope to continue to inspire others to do the same thing because we need a lot of learning here. I want people to take away that this is not changing. So we need to completely reorient our mindset, figure out what's in our control, and what's in our control is supporting each other's learning and understanding quickly here. We're going to have to keep learning, relearning tools. It's going to be change. And that's why one of the articles we wrote was Design with Dialogue, where instead of the traditional process reengineering, you took one process, you re-engineered it, and it was fine for the next 5 years. Here, we need to take down every process and can break it down into subtasks. And for each subtask, ask who does the lead? Is it the human or the robot? Human or the robot? And then know over time that sometimes the human's going to be leading, but maybe 6 months from now, the robots will be leading here. So that kind of different framework on how we think about change, different framework on how we think about who does work, and different framework on how we think about managing risk is the most powerful mindset and capability developing strategy there is for sanity as well as a career advancements over the next 5 years.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for talking with us today on AI Realized. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your learnings with us.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AI Realized podcast. We hope you enjoyed hearing about what's new now and next for enterprise AI.
And let us know what topics would help you on your journey to use AI to redesign your organization from the inside out. Remember to share this episode with a friend, subscribe and leave a review, and listen to more episodes of the AI Realized podcast.